Just days after threatening to obliterate Iran, Trump hits pause. He says peace talks are productive and a deal may be close, but Iran calls it a retreat and denies any talks exist. So is this diplomacy or a strategic delay? Only days earlier, the message had been unmistakable. A 48-hour ultimatum. President Donald Trump warned that if the Strait of Hormuz was not reopened within that window, Iranian infrastructure, particularly power plants, would face overwhelming strikes. The language was direct, forceful, and designed to leave little room for interpretation. The countdown had begun. Military assets were positioned. Expectations were set. The region braced for what appeared to be an imminent escalation. But as the deadline approached, something changed. The ultimatum did not hold. Instead of action, there was a pause. Trump announced a 5-day postponement, stepping back from the immediate threat and introducing a delay at the very moment when pressure had reached its peak. The shift was sudden. And it was significant. Because in strategic terms, what did not happen can be just as important as what does. The absence of strikes altered the trajectory of the situation, replacing certainty with uncertainty. The question now is why? Was this a calculated decision, an attempt to create space for negotiation or reassessment? Or did it reflect the limits of escalation, where the cost of following through began to outweigh the benefits? Either way, the moment marked a turning point, not defined by action, but by restraint. And sometimes, restraint carries its own message. The justification for the delay came quickly, and it reframed the entire moment. President Donald Trump pointed to what he described as good and productive peace talks with Iran, suggesting that a resolution might be closer than anyone had expected. The language was confident, almost optimistic, and sharply contrasted with the urgency of the earlier ultimatum. For a moment, the narrative shifted, from confrontation to possibility. The implication was clear. The 5-day pause was not a retreat, but a window, time created to allow diplomacy to move forward. If the talks were real, then escalation might be giving way to negotiation. But there was a problem. No details followed, no confirmed diplomatic channels, no named intermediaries, no outline of what these discussions involved or how advanced they were. The claim existed without verification, leaving observers to interpret it without a clear foundation. And yet, the impact was immediate. Global attention turned. Markets reacted. Governments began reassessing their positions, weighing the possibility that a breakthrough might be underway. But the uncertainty remained. Because without confirmation, the statement occupied a space between diplomacy and strategy, between what might be happening and what was being presented as happening. And almost as soon as the claim spread, it faced resistance. Raising a deeper question, was this the beginning of a real negotiation? Or the shaping of a narrative designed to suggest one? The response from Tehran came quickly, and it told a very different story. Iranian officials and state media rejected the claim of negotiations outright. No talks, no progress, no diplomatic breakthrough. Instead, they offered an alternative explanation for the sudden pause. This was not diplomacy. It was retreat. According to this narrative, the United States stepped back not because of ongoing discussions, but because of the risk of retaliation. The ultimatum, they argued, had reached its limit, and Washington chose not to follow through. It was a direct challenge. Two interpretations of the same event, moving in opposite directions. One side described progress and de-escalation. The other framed hesitation and strategic weakness. This is more than disagreement. It is a contest for credibility. Because in conflicts like this, perception shapes power. If the pause is seen as a diplomatic opening, it signals control and calculation. If it is seen as a retreat, it suggests vulnerability and constraint, and both sides understand that. Which is why the messaging is so deliberate. The truth may lie somewhere in between, part strategy, part caution, part opportunity. But the effect is the same. Uncertainty deepens. Tension remains. And the narrative itself becomes another front in the conflict, one where influence is measured not by actions alone, but by how those actions are understood. While the public message emphasized restraint, developments on the ground told a very different story. Behind the 5-day pause, military activity was accelerating. Thousands of U.S. Marines were being deployed into the region. Units from both the 31st and 11th Marine Expeditionary Units, totaling more than 4,000 personnel. These are not symbolic forces. They are rapid response units, trained and equipped for immediate operations in high-risk environments. And they were not arriving alone. Naval assets, including amphibious assault ships and support vessels, were moving into position. Ships like the U.S Tripoli, U.S New Orleans, and U.S Boxer carried not just personnel, but the capability to project force along coastlines and across contested areas. The potential missions were clear: securing key maritime routes, establishing buffer zones, seizing or protecting strategic assets if required. This is where the contradiction becomes impossible to ignore. On one side, the language of diplomacy: talks, pauses, de-escalation. On the other, a visible and expanding military buildup, positioning forces for rapid action. These are not opposites. They often happen together. Diplomacy creates time. Military positioning defines what can happen within that time. Which raises a critical possibility. The pause may not be a step back. It may be preparation. At the center of the crisis lies a narrow stretch of water with global consequences: the Strait of Hormuz. It is one of the most critical energy corridors in the world, carrying roughly 20% of daily global oil supply. Every tanker that passes through it represents not just fuel, but stability for economies far beyond the region. When that flow is disrupted, the effects are immediate. Shipping slows, insurance costs rise, trade routes become uncertain, and within hours, global markets begin to react. Oil prices surged past $120 per barrel as fears of prolonged disruption spread, reflecting how sensitive the system is to even the possibility of closure. This is not just a regional issue. It is a global pressure point. Countries thousands of miles away feel the impact through higher energy costs, supply chain disruptions, and economic uncertainty. The strait connects local conflict to global consequence. Then came the announcement. The suggestion that Hormuz could reopen, combined with the pause in military action, triggered a sharp market response. Prices began to fall, stabilizing as expectations shifted. But that stability is fragile. Because control over Hormuz is not only about military presence, it is about influence over the global economy itself. And in this conflict, every development, every statement, every movement now carries consequences that reach far beyond the battlefield. For now, the conflict appears to have slowed. But beneath the surface, the pressure is still building. Iran has made its position clear. Any strike on its infrastructure, it warns, will trigger retaliation, potentially across multiple locations in the region. The threat is not isolated. It is broad. And it is deliberate. At the same time, U.S. forces continue to move. Naval assets are repositioning. Marines are deploying. Defensive systems are being reinforced. These are not signals of retreat. They are preparations, visible and ongoing. This creates a fragile balance. Diplomacy is being discussed. Military options remain active. Both paths exist at the same time, each influencing the other, each shaping what happens next. But stability, for now, is only temporary. The 5-day pause offers space, time for negotiation, time for reassessment, time for decisions that could alter the course of the conflict. But it does not resolve the underlying tension. It delays it. And in that delay lies uncertainty. Because every hour that passes brings new calculations, new risks, and new possibilities. Which leads to the question now at the center of everything. Is this the beginning of de-escalation? Or is it simply a countdown to a much larger confrontation still to come?